Hello.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mara and Josh, for the incredibly generous and thorough introductions. You now know a lot about us. There are two thank yous I want to add to the mix, and the first is Jana Levin, who's Director and Chair of Sciences here at Pioneer Works, who has been hosting science events here for years and getting people to talk about the nerdiest shit in the greatest detail. And let me bring a little bit of like eco-social science vibe into the mix. We co-ideated the Science and Society series over rosé in the garden like 5 years ago. And I also want to give a shout out to Gabriel Florenz and Vivian Chu, who I worked super closely with on this exhibition. They're the artistic director and director of exhibitions here, Pure Delights. And when I called them last July and was like, I think I have a show for you. I've been trying to get you to do a climate show for like 5 years. I got your climate show, let's do this. They said yes. So the lesson here is, I guess, just like say yes. Year of yes, but like climate solutions, yes. Not like jump out of airplanes, take more shots of tequila, yes. So I wanted to start off just by reading to you the description of this event to ground us in what we're here to discuss. As Josh said, this is not an evening to wallow in despair, but an opportunity to grapple with some big questions. So, this is the brief.
Let's do it.
When it comes to climate change, much of our cultural imagery is apocalyptic. The result is that most of us can't imagine realistically getting it right. And if we can't imagine possible climate futures, we can't create them. This is design's time to shine. Practically, tangibly, design, from buildings and technology to materials and processes, shapes how we experience and move through the world, shapes what we value and how we interact. Given how much the climate has already changed and how much more change is inevitable, we urgently need design to lead us toward a transformed world. What if climate adaptation is beautiful? What if we look to nature for solutions? What if technology is a tool instead of a mode? What if museums are hubs of research and development for society? What if we act as if we love the future? These are the questions that we've been sitting with, that I've been sitting with, the themes of the show, Climate Futurism, and of my forthcoming book, What If We Get It Right? With that, I want to start off with a question for you, Paola. When and why did you start thinking about climate and incorporating it into your creative practice?
Well, it's before I started the so-called creative practice. I remember when I was a child, I grew up in Italy, I must have been in my teens, and I remember reading about German people protesting against the over-packaging of some products coming from the United States. And I remember that, I will not name names, it's a cosmetics company that is here in the United States that uses this kind of like a very pale green for all of its products. And it was this soap, a soap, like a facial soap. The soap was wrapped in like paper, then wrapped in foil, put in a tray of plastic that went into a little plastic tube. Then it had some corrugated cardboard, and then it was in a cardboard box and plastic around it. And I remember that there was this news of Germans like pulling out all the packaging, dropping it there, and taking only the soap with them, leaving it in the store. And I was like, whoa. I mean, nobody was thinking of waste as something that had any impact on the planet. I mean, trash was trash. What's the big deal? And all of a sudden, I realized, oh, maybe this stuff instead suffocates the world. And so it was before the beginning of my career that I had this idea. And then it was always natural, because I believe that design is about whatever is happening in the world at any time. So the moment there was a consciousness of an environmental problem, design was involved. So it was natural. I didn't have to like put it on my mirror in the morning, remember the environment. It was just like, okay.
So, Lake, same question to you. In your official bio, it says that you examine architecture and its relationship to place and community through an eco-political lens. Has that always been the case?
I think maybe not like explicitly, right? And I think through this collaboration in this show, I was like forefronting it in a very clear and direct way, but it's always been something that I'm interested in. And coming from like an architectural background, I've been fascinated more with, with architecture as kind of like dominion over space and land and environment, and more about how it may work as a kind of full holistic ecosystem between environment, community, space, program, all of that.
So I was particularly excited to have these two guests because they're both trained as architects as well as working as and closely with artists. And to me, there's this really fundamental question of like, how do we literally design the future, right? And like, what are the solutions and skills and approaches that we need? And when it comes to like your artistic practice, people are always trying to put labels on the work you do, right? So for those of you who haven't yet been upstairs, these are some images from this show that Lake created. Maybe you could first just describe the images and then we can talk genre. Okay. So what are we looking at?
So we are looking at an alternate timeline of Brooklyn, the borough, in the mid-90s. And this is part of a project that I was exhibiting at the Museum of Modern Art, Reconstructionist Blackness in America. And this was called The Frozen Neighborhoods. And so there was a kind of dystopian, I guess, government.
We're gonna get to the frozen neighborhoods later. Don't go there quite yet.
Okay.
Give us this show and then we'll go backwards.
All right. So this image.
I have a plan.
Is a lush.
Also, the slides are in a very specific order.
So this is a lush, verdant, overgrown Brooklyn of like rewilding, reclaiming the urban landscape.
And what do we have here?
And here we have two like agro-tech, farm tech inventions from this world. So we have this like seed drone, water and seed drone, single passenger. And then on the, I guess, your left, your right is, is this hover farm greenhouse. So I love the idea of like these salvage punk technologies that have to do with, again, dealing with the environment, dealing with ecology, dealing with community in space.
And it obviously seems like a very miserable future to be stuck in, right? So many huge smiles in your work that I think this is a very appealing future to think about. Especially this. I mean, how freaking cool are these people? What do we have here? These are the last ones from... So these aren't in the show, but these are works created in this same set. And
exactly,
they'll appear in my book.
In the same vein and in the same world. So I always get this mixed up looking at it here.
Don't worry
we
about
have
it.
the farm. We have this poultry farm, and then we have this oyster farm with like this, in this project, and you can see it up there, I'm like revitalizing both the train system and the canal system. So again, the idea of salvage punk, of working with what already exists, which is very much a part of how we can get it right. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? It's literally all there. So revitalizing the train system, revitalizing the canal system is means of both transporting, production, distribution, but also just, you know, moving up and down across.
And people like to call you an Afrofuturist, which seems actually quite narrower than you envision your own work. And this term salvage punk is one that I learned from you, and I've like completely enamored with it, right? Because when we think about how we build the future, so much of it, Paola, from a design perspective, is always like, okay, what is the shiny new electric car? Like, what is the new thing we're gonna like buy? Instead of saying like, this is what we already have around us. Like, how do we think about this as an opportunity to like remix things? And so the genre of like solar punk, which is about like, you know, renewable energy and punkness.
Yes.
Salvage punk, like sci-fi, like proto-utopianism. There's like, so as a kid who grew up in Brooklyn in the 90s, I had a particular affinity for imagining this alternate timeline because it's so exciting to think like we could have had this instead and we still can have some version of it. Like we already have all these elements of it. So I'm curious, Paola, from your perspective as a curator, like so much of what you do is point us towards these poignant and novel examples of how design can appear in our daily lives, how it can help us address the challenges we face. How do you approach this curatorial task in the context of the climate crisis?
Well, it's quite natural. Once again, it's natural when you start thinking of design as really being attuned and connected to life. Design is political, design is sometimes too expensive, design sometimes is bad. So, you know, instead of thinking of design only as great furniture that costs a lot of money or perfect Apple products, one should think of design also as crap that is badly designed. You know what I'm saying? It's like everything is really designed. It's kind of a platitude, but it's true. So if you start thinking about it that way, then the task is not to tell people what's good and what's bad, but rather to stimulate people's own critical sense, right? So the job of a curator is very often, in my mind, not that of being a teacher, but that of being like a poker, you know? And I think it works well if you show good examples. And you know, you're talking about salvage punk, and you're talking about the idea of repairing. It always like really made me crazy that you cannot repair stuff in the United States, right? I mean, in Italy, I used to, you know, everything from your coat to your coffee maker could be repaired. So it's very simply teaching people that objects have a presence and a value and a consequence, right? And that's also the last exhibition that we have at MoMA about design, not about architecture, that's another one, but it's called Life Cycles, and it talks about materials in design as having a whole life cycle from extraction to disposal, and the object is just a moment in this life cycle, right? So you start making people think of objects in a different way, as not consumable products, but as things that you adopt in your life. And hopefully that will create a different dynamic.
So this is like the one tiny detour into like the bad news. It'll be over in like 90 seconds. But I feel like we need to ground ourselves in the climate emergency as we think about like the motivation for transforming our society, right? So I just wanted to share 4 facts with you to remind us how high the stakes are. In this summer, in July, seawater in Florida reached 101 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like literally a jacuzzi, which was possibly a world record for sea surface temperatures. Ice is melting and sea level is rising. Possibly 6 feet more of water could be on our coastlines by the end of this century, displacing hundreds of millions of people. In the 80s, here in the US, we experienced $1 billion disaster every 4 months. But now we have $1 billion level of damage disaster every 3 weeks. And just today, the latest news is that 2023 was the highest ever carbon emissions. So we're not only are we like not going in the right direction, we are still accelerating in the wrong direction. So those are the stakes when we think about the climate emergency. And the reason I share that is because, Paola, reading your work about a design emergency has really informed my thinking. Oh, time out for the rubber ducky and the oyster farm of the future. I also want to live there. So I'm wondering, Paola, if you can help us connect these dots. So you use this term, design emergency. Where did that come from, and how are you using that to shape your work?
It was 2020 during the lockdown. We were all home, right? So I was locked with my husband at home on Broadway and Canal, and every night Larry was watching actually, Fat Joe having his Instagram lives with all his friends. And so at some point he said, you can do it too. I'm like, yeah, me and Fat Joe completely, yeah. So
you guys totally saw this coming,
totally,
right?
Yeah. So I started thinking, that could be interesting. I said, but why should I do it alone? So I called my friend Alice Rawsthorne, who's a wonderful design critic. She's based in London. We've been friends forever, but we hadn't done anything together. I tell her Larry's idea, and she says, cool, let's do it. How do we call it? And we were like, this. How about design emergency? Okay. And then we called our friend Frith, who's a graphic designer, and in 2 days she had the identity, and we were off to the races. But our prompt was the fact that both Alice and I have always dreamt of making people understand what a force to reckon with design is, for good and for bad. And in the case of the pandemic, it could be for good. In the sense that we're already so many designers that we're getting involved, and we're trying to help, from Michael Murphy and Mass Design Studio up in Cambridge, that we're helping Mount Sinai put together, emergency wards for COVID patients, to I know an anesthesiologist in Bologna that was making the valve for the split ventilator, or the illustrators at the CDC that were branding the COVID, like the Hellraiser deep water mine with the red spikes. So there were many examples of design. So we started in this complete emergency that had paralyzed the world. And when the emergency of COVID seemed to start to ebb, and we know that it hasn't gone away, but it seemed to ebb a little bit, Alice and I decided to continue and to show what all the different forms of design can do to help us build a better future, right? So the motto that there is always a design emergency comes from the fact that there is always an emergency in the world. And if there's an emergency in life, design is involved. So we do not believe that design can save the world. That would be stupid. No discipline on its own can do. But design is a fundamental enzyme to transform any kind of revolution in science, in technology, in politics, into life. So we want to give this ammunition to people.
So this is an Instagram account which you should follow, and a podcast series. There's a book.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a podcast. I'm so bad at
It's
selling
delightful.
my stuff.
I'm here to do this for you.
Oh my God! And Lake is next week.
Lake is the next guest.
Yeah.
They were just recorded yesterday, so we're all ready for this. Lake, I'm curious, what does this term design emergency mean to you? And are there any particular examples that come to mind when you think of design in this context?
Wow.
I didn't give them the questions in advance.
No, not at all. But we've had this conversation before, right? And I remember we were talking about what we would like to see. Remember when we did the thing at the
thing at the place?
The thing at the
Where we
place.
did the
With
talking?
the people?
In the Highline, we had a conversation at the Highline.
Yeah.
And I think
Our Climate Week.
exactly the Climate Week, and I think someone asked you a question.
The Highline. The one that I missed. Yes.
Yeah, and we did this.
You guys all are super clear what we're talking about,
Yeah,
right?
so sorry, I'm just a glimpse into a kind of personal conversation. Remember when we did a talk at the Highline, and I think someone asked you a question about like what you would want to see, and you were like, I want to see, not this desperate, we have to save the world, but just the nuance of like stories and narratives that deal with the fact that this is something that we have to contend with, this reality, so that it's not so much like all of you have to go out right now and pick 5 things that you can do to contribute to this emergency that we're facing. You know what I mean? But just making it more kind of present. You were like, if we get, rom-coms featuring...
This is my dream.
Exactly.
That climate rom-coms become a genre.
Climate
The
rom-coms.
meet cute at the neighborhood composting
Yes,
facility. Which, if you have not called the mayor's office to tell them we need to keep community composting going in New York City, please call the mayor.
Exactly.
It's like, that is some nonsense. We can afford to compost in New York City. Yeah, this is my dream.
Exactly. And so that has always, that has been
Climate solutions need more romance is my public platform.
There we go. And so that has literally been my approach to the work that I create, is that it's not like frantic and it's not like pedantic or patronizing, that like I'm trying to whatever. I'm just, you know what I mean? I'm imagining, I was like a Muppet Babies kid. This was the shit that I loved. I was a Muppet Babies kid.
Babies.
Exactly. So so that's the way that I operate, and that's the way I work. And that conversation we had when people were asking you, like, what can we do? Like,
you were like,
it needs to weave it.
Sorry, maybe not everyone watched the show.
If you remember, exactly. No, but that's the thing. It's just like the nuance and the detail of it, and yeah, like you said, the stories. If it just becomes part of our day-to-day, right? And I remember, in fact, it was over there, you had the climate talk here, Pioneer Works.
The previous Science and Society event.
Exactly.
With Kate Orff and Brian Lee on the future of coastal cities.
Yes. And I think Kate said something like, it is not the thing, I'm going to mess it up. It's not the thing that you think. It basically is that it is the culture. It's not like the solution. It's not like we're going to do this one big thing. We're going to invent this thing. We're going to do this. I can't remember the quote exactly, but it was like, it's
the
not...
The thing that you don't think is the thing is actually the thing.
Is actually the thing. That's the quote. Exactly.
Just,
yes. Yes. And that has stuck with me, and that has kind of been the way that I operate.
You know what she meant by that? So she's a landscape architect, and after Hurricane Sandy hit New York City, she was like, oh, well, we need to design the coastlines and think about how we can restore coastal ecosystems and use oysters and build these reefs and barriers to slow down the force of the storm. And then she realized the thing that she didn't think that was the thing that was actually the thing was engaging coastal communities in the discussion of what they wanted New York City to look like, what would make them feel safe and connected, and know enough about the risks to make better decisions. So that in the end, it was actually more about people than about people first instead of design first.
Always.
That interview is also in the book. But when I interviewed...
I love it. Inspired me.
Paola, that's why I remember that line, because I've like edited that interview. Of like, so I think like when I asked you this question about design emergency, I was really curious what you would say, because like this is just not the mindset you operate in. Like your work is full of joy, and actually I would say like a new sense of equilibrium. Like it feels settled. It doesn't feel like, whoa, like what's gonna happen next? It's like, oh, and now we live in this like fabulous new version of the world. So I wanted to counterbalance my bad stats with some good ones to lead us into this thinking more about possibility. And I was really shocked by this first one. About 75% of the infrastructure that will be in place by 2050 has yet to be built. So we are literally rebuilding, remaking the world. If we think about like our roads, our water systems, electricity, everything is currently being remade, so we could of course like do it differently. From 2010 to 2019, per unit costs of solar energy decreased by 85%. Wind energy costs decreased by 55%, and lithium-ion batteries by 85%. So renewable energy is cheaper than fossil fuels in most scenarios now. So we like that. Shout out to renewables, thank you. Last year, the world hit $1.1 trillion in a single year of investment going into the climate transition to clean energy and clean mobility. $1 trillion, so that's huge. Maybe $1 trillion also went into fossil fuels last year, but you know, whatever. Baby steps, I guess. And the big policy that passed Congress last year, the Inflation Reduction Act, commits over $370 billion to climate solutions in the US. Attempts to prioritize environmental justice, and this is the largest investment that our government has ever made in reducing global warming, ostensibly putting us on the path to reducing emissions 40% by the end of this decade. So a lot of big things are happening in the right direction too. And just a short PSA, if you would like money to move your house off of fossil fuels, put up solar panels, heat pumps, get an induction stove, there are huge tax credits from the federal government, like 30% back on your solar panels, thousands of dollars for heat pumps, etc. Most people don't know this is just like, it's money from the government. They will just like pay you to electrify your home. So most of us are probably renters, but if there's any homeowners in here, that one's for you. And the last good news, well, there's more, but for now, 70% of adults in the US say they wish they could do more to combat climate change. 62% say they feel a personal sense of responsibility to do so, but 51% say they don't know where to start. So we have the majority of Americans who want to be part of the solution and just need that foothold. So at the same time we're in this climate and design emergency, we're in this huge moment of possibility. But it's really hard to think about the future. As I've been doing interviews for this book, as I've been working on curating this art show, I've found that like so many people have a hard time imagining the what if we get it right future. Like we have essentially all the climate solutions we need. We know how to shift to regenerative agriculture. We know how to electrify transportation and energy and green buildings. Like we know all of this, and yet people can't actually imagine deploying all those solutions quickly at scale. So I'm curious to hear from both of you, why do you think that is? Why do you think we have such a hard time envisioning the future that we would actually want to live in?
I'm surprised that that's the case, because there's such a thing as science fiction. Maybe it's been too dystopian for too long. You know, that's the problem. But we're all sci-fi fans here, right? So, and you're not? Oh no, Lake and I are.
Against it? I just don't really like know anything about it.
No, because Lake and I were just like exchanging
Okay, this is
sci-fi.
you guys just talk to each other about sci-fi.
You know, it's interesting. So sci-fi is divided in two, more or less. I mean, more, but you know, the dystopian and the utopian. And maybe it's harder to get utopian sci-fi movies lately, right? They're all kind of dystopian. I was rewatching Blade Runner 2049. I was like, oh my God, like it really is like one of the darkest. But I can imagine the future, but I cannot imagine how to get there, in the sense that it seems like there's so much in policy making, and I know you're an expert in policy also, Ayana, in policy, and you are also policy buff. We know how important policy is, and I think we can imagine how the future should be, but getting there seems to be insurmountable, maybe.
I mean, this is your jam. You're like, future, I'm gonna build my own future.
It is, yeah. Well,
but that's pretty rare. Like, futurists are pretty rare to run across.
well, I mean,
How do you do it?
every story requires tension. So, and that is especially true for sci-fi. There's no sci-fi that's just happy. There's dystopian sci-fi, where it's like the worst possible conditions. You take contemporary situations and you exacerbate them. And then the utopian sci-fi, the other side, is that you achieve utopia, but at some great expense. There's something that's sacrificed to achieve utopia. So for all the movies we've seen, sometimes it's you can't have emotions. Sometimes it's only certain people can occupy this floating
What about the Jetsons?
thing in the, well, they say that the Jetsons and the, what is it, the bedrock, what is it?
Yeah, the Flintstones.
The Flintstones exist at the same time. That's a theory. So the Jetsons, exactly.
These are like
so
alternate timelines?
Well, no, they live at the exact same time, and the Flintstones exist in a completely destroyed Earth, and the Jetsons live up in the air. So there is someone.
You're blowing my mind.
So there's some.
No, the Flintstones world is great.
Well, no, in the sci-fi, there's.
I mean, don't you want to like drive your car like this?
Exactly. Well, no. Well, science fiction, utopian sci-fi, completely depends on an enormous sacrifice. Always. Literature and music, it doesn't matter. It's always what it is. There's an enormous sacrifice for it. But I think that people are just, caught up with the material realities that they have to contend with, you know?
One of my favorite climate journalists, Kendra Pierre-Louis, who wrote an essay in All We Can Save about this topic, about climate in film, and specifically she points to Black Panther as like the example of like a climate future that we could have, right? There's no urban sprawl, there's like trolleys in the streets, all these green buildings, everything's run on vibranium, there's these great like maglev trains.
But they had to hide from the colonialists.
Don't be that guy, you know? So you can't have it all, but like that is one of the, but like nature is preserved in that like very advanced version of the future. Okay, this is not the we're gonna have to like find a new segue here. So, Paola, as you and Alice wrote, design as a social, political, and ecological tool that can foster positive change at a time when we urgently need it. To me, that just makes it so clear how much room there is for creativity in all of this, right? There's all these tools we have that we can sort of deploy and remix however we see a need to. So we've been sort of talking around this, but I would love you each to answer explicitly, what do you think is the role of design, of designers, in shaping our climate future?
Huge. I mean, from all sides. So let's talk about object designers. They can start by designing better equipment for us to recycle and to compost and just like very basically also the tools that we need at home to initiate our change. Or, visualization designers can make data more explicit, let more people understand what's going on. The data that you just read could be visualized in effective ways, like the one that I sent you.
I could have made like cool slides.
Yeah, cool slides that remain in your mind. Like, that visualization that I sent you that shows the temperature change from the beginning of the 20th century and shows how much faster it happened. So that kind of visualization design, infrastructure designers, and then there can be designers that are embedded in mayors' offices and remind the mayor how people really live. I mean, you name it. There's design comes, I consider architecture also part of design. So there are like hundreds of types of design, and they're all engaged with change. So if we want change to happen, design is absolutely useful and necessary. And I am just hoping that more and more kids will want to do that as a profession. That's why I love that they are so enraptured by Lake's work.
So the education team here at Pioneer Works has been bringing school classes through the show, and they've been particularly drawn to Lake's work and then creating their own murals and collages about the future that they want, and it is just the coolest,
There's
sweetest
one over
thing.
there. You can see it
on the wall over here, when we turn the lights back on, you'll see a mural of people, a community project on the future of Red Hook. And my favorite part of that mural, here we go.
Thank you.
Is the part on the upper left, which describes that in the future we will all have boat shoes, and they are literally boats we wear on our feet. I want these shoes for my own. So I think there's this process of like collective visioning too, that like sparked by artists can start to have these ripples. Lake, how are you finding that like people respond to the vision that you put out there on climate futurism?
No, it's been really incredible to see the sort of feedback. You remember the opening night, I held court with like 4 little kids.
7-year-olds had so many questions.
And they had so many questions, and I absolutely love that. I mean, I create these things out of, I have my own particular narrative and my conceptual framework and the world it all comes from, and I like to just place it there, and I love that the audience can find things that resonate with them and that they get really energized and really excited about, and that it reminds them of something, of anything. And that's, for me, one of the like major motivating agents of me create. I have how I feel about it, you know what I mean? And my own, like the way, like my process of developing.
I don't know if I've ever heard Lake talk about feelings.
Exactly.
Let's do it now in front of all these people. Ice
cold. So no, I have, the way I'm seeing this world, and it's interesting because there's like, it's seen as kind of exuberant and exciting, but how I develop it is often very much based on like very dystopian kind of policies that drive this world, and how the community responds to that and what they develop through that, through these challenges.
We're going off script here. Close your eyes. None of this is happening. None of this have you seen. Okay. Wait, where's the, I was supposed to go to the MoMA one. Okay, take me back.
Yeah,
backwards. Your eyes are all closed, right? Okay, great. We're gonna explain these things to you shortly. Okay, so here's the Frozen Neighborhoods exhibition at MoMA 2020.
Yes.
This is the precursor to the show here, in a sense.
Exactly.
What is the Frozen Neighborhood?
So that's the thing. So you're seeing a community that has responded to some pretty repressive, like, legislation, right? And I'm imagining what they've managed to produce in the intervening years when this mobility credit system has been imposed, which pretty much determines how often, how frequently, how far you can travel. So it draws on a tradition of maroon communities from the antebellum Carolinas and, Brazil, Jamaica, what have you, and places it kind of in this mid-90s context of Brooklyn, New York, under this mobility credit system where these communities, are pretty much frozen in place. And so what have they managed to create and produce in those years, in those times? So I imagine a bunch of these like aeroponic, autonomous, aquaponic systems, rain harvesting systems, these freshwater corridors. So this is like a reimagine. So it is utopian in the sense of the resilience, the creativity, and the inventiveness of these communities, but it is against the backdrop of some very regressive, repressive politics. Yeah.
And one of the reactions to that oppression is often creativity. And so in this show here, you explore like, okay, and then what, right? In terms of like the proto-farm communities upstate. So maybe give us a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so this was really exciting. So for this show, I was just like, imagining that there is a knowledge share, a collaboration with upstate communities. I was fascinated with like bioforestry, particularly when I remember being in like world history in the 10th grade, and we learned that what indicated an advanced society was the transition from hunter-gatherer to an agrarian society. But the agrarian society was predicated on like clearing land for farming, as opposed to bioforestry, agroforestry, which a lot of indigenous communities operate under, which is not clearing land, it's actually planting in a way that works with the ecology, with the local ecology, the local ecological systems, which persist for thousands of years. You don't see a farm from 1,000 years ago, but a bioforestry system, you know what I mean? A natural planting system within that you do see, but we were learned that an advanced society has dominion over nature, doesn't work with it, controls it, destroys it, clears it. So that was kind of my fascination of bringing that kind of narrative back into it, which is the failure of these kind of like government systems, these particular social services. Now we have the Brooklyn frozen neighborhoods, these advanced technologies, but now we have the upstate proto-farm communities that are providing produce.
Like fugitive network, it's like an overground railroad kind of thing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I think this like, what can we make in the face of challenges is, the situation that we find ourselves in, for sure. And Paola, when I was reading your book, and in particular the interview that Alice did with Vinu Daniels, I was so inspired. This incredible architect, this is one of his creations. I was so moved by this bit he said that I just wanted to share it and hear your thoughts about it now. He said, "We are the last generation of architects who matter. We are living at a time when architects can still do something about the big problems in front of us. We are the generation that needs to put into practice the techniques that have been taught for generations, whether earthen techniques, passive cooling techniques, salvaging techniques, or technical craft techniques. We need to think about what we will give our children. What happens to the people who come later? You should enact your vision, but can you reduce something Can you salvage something? Can you not cut that one tree? That is a step towards sustainable building. So I'm curious how you put that into the context of this conversation, your work, and the direction that we need to go, because like the subtitle of your book is about building a better future. So maybe if you could reflect on that or share more about this particular designer's approach to this integration.
Vinu is based in Kerala, the state of Kerala in India, and he studied architecture at a time when the architecture taught in India was very much the Western architecture, Corbusian or from the UK, but there was an architect, Laurie Baker, that was trying to teach everyone to use the traditional techniques that you found locally, wherever local was for you, to try and find out what is of the place, because usually that's the most sensible use of the resources at everybody's disposal. So Vinu studied with him, and one of the things that Laurie Baker used to say was, he tried to teach the Gandhian principle that every home should be built, every building should be built with materials found within a 15-mile radius. And if those materials are trash, then you build with trash, right? So when Vinu got out of school and he went back to the state of Kerala, he decided to start building with what was available there, and also to really engage the bricklayers, the workers, the manufacturers that were there locally. So he called his company Wall Makers. And the work that he does is beautiful. You see here this pirouette house that's done with bricks that are made with the soil there in Kerala by the bricklayers that are there, and it's gorgeous, and it uses all the cooling systems. Everything is done according to a traditional set of instructions, but with a contemporary sensibility. So what does it make me think about? The fact that we hear a lot, sometimes ideas from the past are very, very useful for the future. So to me, this attitude that Vinu described reminds me of my grandmother and my great aunts, you know, and that came through World War II and didn't have much. I mean, seriously, we're talking about learning from the local wisdom and from the past, and it's not empty words, it's the truth. Of course, the world evolves, and we cannot use also the forms of the past. That would be maybe wrong, but understanding better what came before is what can inform us to build for those who will come next.
So you were thinking about all of these kinds of big questions as you curated the show for the Milan Triennale exhibition called Broken Nature. Let's see where we are in the slides now. Here we are. Thank you for that acoustic accompaniment. So we have a few examples of works in the show, but there were dozens of artworks in this show that you got to curate in your hometown of Milan. And you focus specifically on restorative design, as you call it. So explain to us like how you were conceiving of this show and deciding what artworks should be part of it.
Well, it was a very Ayanish kind of attitude. No, you know why? Because the idea, it was really, what if we get it right? Because what I was trying, Ayanish. So what I was trying to do is to show people that being responsible can be delightful and sensual.
Okay,
and
I'll take it.
So take it. So I'm from Milan. I am from Milan. I'm very proud of being Milanese. And the beautiful thing about Milan is that people really are interested in design. So they're interested in soccer and in design. So during Design Week in Milan, I go to my bakery and the bakers say, how's Design Week this time? Do you have tickets for this and for that? Like really, it's normal. So I knew that citizens would come to this exhibition, not just design buffs. And I wanted this exhibition to be inspiring for citizens that wanted to think of different strategies to not sacrifice the delight and the elegance that Milanese thrive in, and that, you know, like pigs in mud, and that nonetheless would be able to be responsible and sustainable. So this is exactly what this exhibition was about. And the idea of restorative design is that we can restore our balance with nature, we can do better and still have it all. and still be delighted. Now, this entrance in the real fascist building is not as delightful as the rest, but you're showing the next one. So this is an example of speculative design. In the exhibition, you had very, very practical object, from the disposable pregnancy test to, just very pragmatic, and then you had speculative design. This work is by Sputniko, aka Hiromi Ozaki, who's a wonderful artist and mathematician that usually does objects that are accompanied by artwork and videos and even songs. So in Japan, she's also like a pop star. This is a work that she did after Fukushima. She devised these nanohana heels that are platform heels with these little reservoirs that have seeds. There are some plants that absorb toxic materials from the earth. So the idea is that you strut dancing on the land of Fukushima, and in the meantime, you plant these seeds that in the future will replenish and clean up the soil of Fukushima from all radioactive debris. So this is really...
Why not?
Yeah, why not? Exactly.
Jana, I can totally picture you wearing these shoes wherever you are.
Totally.
To get her a pair.
But so it was important. It was a very joyful exhibition. And people really reacted. Like this is an interesting story. I'm telling you about Citizens. There's an Instagram feed that I love that's called Wow Milano that shows all of these Milanese ladies just like walking in the street in slow motion, and they are like in their 50s and 60s, and they have the perfect bag and the hair and everything. And one of these ladies in the exhibition just came running to me saying, "You gotta tell me where I can do that." That is a green burial system. The idea is that in that big egg is the corpse of a person that then gets buried. There's no, well, you know about green burial, I don't have to explain it to you, no embalmment fluids and no zinc, it's just in the earth. And the idea is that you have the whole system with the seeds of the tree already in it. It's called Capsula Mundi. And so this lady, this perfectly coiffed lady, came to me asking me where she could get information about it so that she could give it to her sons so that they could bury her that way. So Citizens having ideas and really leaving the exhibition with a little bit of that change of culture and some initial solutions, some step forward.
And this is the third piece that I wanted to highlight from that show, thinking about changing culture and in a physical material sense.
And beauty. You were talking also about beauty before. So I was telling you about Elegance. These are two delightful and amazing designers. It's called Forma Fantasma, and I really suggest you all look them up. They're two Italian designers that trained in the Netherlands. Their shtick is to make gorgeous objects that are almost like Trojan horses, attract attention, and then all of a sudden reveal a lot about some underbelly, in this case, the underbelly of the e-waste system in the world. You know, the e-waste is a problem. It's a problem of exploitation, of toxicity, of, once again, colonialism, and you name it. And so, Andrea and Simone made these beautiful pieces of furniture that could be in any showroom of office furniture. They're all made with electronic waste recycled. And one stops, looks at these beautiful objects, and then all of a sudden, to the side are these videos. Some are just beautiful videos that show the components that go to waste, and then there are also interviews with NGO officers and other people that are engaged in trying to solve the problem. So it's about having the beauty, having the elegance, but also learning that beauty and that elegance can be preserved by also replenishing some of the injustices in the world.
We need so many more art shows like this.
There are many designers like this,
Yeah.
I mean, I cannot do art shows and you cannot do art shows like yours all the time, but we can keep our eyes open.
Because I feel like very rarely are we exposed to the solutions. A lot of the problem, a lot of the what if we don't get it right, but not a lot of the elegant, delightful progress. And so I'm curious, I know, Paola, you've thought about this a lot. What is the role for arts institutions like MoMA or Pioneer Works in facilitating or accelerating this transition from a fossil-fueled economy and society to a regenerative one? How do you picture that?
Well, tonight, Lake spoke about you spoke about two exhibitions that prompted some new work. Lake talked about, reconstructions, which was a complicated exhibition that also sparked a lot of polemics, but that was all healthy, right? And you spoke about Kate Orff's project with the oysters. That
Oyster
was also,
texture.
Oyster texture. That was also for an exhibition at MoMA that was about, if water rises in New York. So that's an example, and I can think of so many instances in which institutions, not only MoMA, prompted research on new ideas in architecture and in design. And in a wider kind of like system, cultural institutions could really be the R&D of society if there were more connection with real life. So the institutions like Pioneer Works or like MoMA in some instances that make sure that art and artists can work closely in close quarters with real people and with other institutions are the ones that really can affect change. So the cultural institutions are very important. I just wish politicians understood it. Yeah.
I mean, the thing that I've always appreciated about Pioneer Works in particular is how science is such a core to their conception of culture and cultural change. So shout out to Pioneer Works. Thank you for believing in science in a world where facts are so fuzzy. Some things are true and some things are false, and not everyone gets to have their own truth. This is like my least favorite modern use of language, like, well, my truth. I'm like, nope, 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 nope. Your own feelings, your own opinions, your own perspective, not your own truth.
Facts.
Nope. So I think we're gonna take questions from the audience in a moment, so start thinking about that. But I want to, Paola, ask you and Lake each one more question. And Paola, I know you and I have talked a lot about this like big question about your vision of the future if we get it right. And in particular about like what would be different about New York City, about our homes, our communities, and without any, without any visuals, can you describe to us and help us see your version of this place that we call home, if we get it right?
That's pretty much Lake's. No.
Lake's next.
When I think about what if we get it right, I think about no borders. That's really funny. I mean, it's one of the first things that come to mind in getting it right. This idea of justice that eliminates the need for barriers. I mean, there will always be evil people. It's not like everybody's going to be good in the future, but there's not going to need to be this institutionalized keeping people out. So that's my first idea.
Which is important in a context where the climate crisis is forcing hundreds of millions of people to move to either higher ground or less fire or flood-prone areas, etc.
Absolutely. And paradoxically, when I think of what if we get it right, I'm less worried about designers and architects. I'm more worried about economists and politicians, in the sense that I would love for them all to give us the tools to create equity. Right? That's why sometimes, I think of AI, maybe that would be a good use of AI to find this kind of algorithm that makes it so that we can have a real equity from which then we can rebuild. In a way, I think that if we're all put in the conditions to do better, because we're less worried about food security, about any kind of security, about borders, about passports, about being evicted, about being repatriated, then I think we can have more space in our mind to do things better. So as usual, I'm more abstract and less descriptive.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's the same thing I think about when I think about who gets to work on climate solutions in general. In 2020, when we were all forced to think about Black Lives Matter, my reaction was to say, well, Black people actually care more about climate change than white people. But how can you expect us to focus on solutions when there's these other near-term existential challenges, right? So if we can so for a while I used to think why is everyone working on all these other issues? We all need to be working on climate. But in fact, we need to solve other problems to free us up for more people to work on climate. So absolutely the justice foundation to all of that. So there's so many sassy things I'm just not gonna say. Find me afterwards. So Lake, I just want to close by offering another one of your visions for the future. I won't ask you to make it up because you literally have already made it to show us. There's these few images of your installation at the Venice Architecture Biennale, your African conservation effort and All Africa Protoport, which won the Silver Lion Prize at the Biennale. Can you tell us about this installation? What's the vibe? What are you showing us about the future?
The vibe, yeah, so.
What's the soundtrack?
The vibe, so the soundtrack is,
Is Wu-Tang for the children, yes or no?
Wu-Tang is absolutely for the children, but the soundtrack of this project is one of those Ethiopic 70s jazzy tunes. Literally, that's
Vibin'.
what drove this project. But no, I was, if the Frozen Neighborhoods was about being kind of contained, this project is almost a diametric opposite, where I imagine that in, the decade or so post when the majority of African countries gained independence from colonial rule, the colonial powers, the extractions of colonial power on the continent was removed completely, and that conservationists throughout the continent writ large collaborated to form the African conservation effort, and then through that created alternative fuel production that was not driven, of course, by the sort of resource curse that we're aware of, where, African countries that have the most resources, of course, are exploited and are the poorest countries. So I came up with the ACE, African Conservation Effort, and the All Africa Protoports, which are these massive sort of research complexes that are located throughout the diaspora. But in this world, diaspora is not the term. The term is the African world. And so they're located on these coastal cities, on the continents, Mombasa, Port Said, Lagos, and then the African world, Los Angeles, Havana, Barranquilla, Kingston, etc. And so I just created all of these different proprietary technologies, this algal drift pool, suborbital launch hybrid system based on, of course, algae production, tidal, wind, solar, etc., maglev monorails for overland travel, and just imagined this world where colonial rule and where we are now isn't the reality. So this world takes place in kind of like 1972. Again, a decade or so after we gained independence. Because what I'm fascinated with is when you think of things like Star Trek and, well, not Star Wars, but more like Star Trek and a lot of Western sci-fi, it fundamentally is rooted in the exploitation of the African continent and everything that we've drawn out of that reality, right? The spaceships, everything comes from what has been exploited. So I like to look at certain inflection points throughout history and then pivot from there to create an alternative reality.
So we are at a historical inflection point, I would argue, in terms of our climate, in terms of our politics. Wouldn't it be great if we had this future instead of the one we seem to be barreling towards? So I'm just so grateful to both of you for helping us see alternative possible futures, right? Because like we made the world that we live in. We could like remake it, remix it. There's so much possibility left. So with that, we'll take a few questions from the audience. There's going to be a spotlight right there and a microphone. Be brave. It is your time to shine. All right.
Hello.
Hello.
With your collective powers, how can we manifest more money into climate-centric design? Thank you.
I can't even fundraise for my own nonprofit. I have no idea.
Yeah, by probably making it so that it doesn't seem like a sacrifice, you know, I think we just have to make it viable, make it desirable, make it like a good investment so people will devote the money to it because they won't have to sacrifice. People who are interested in money are going to be interested in money even if it's sustainable and renewable.
There's actually a lot of money to be made in this transformation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there are lots of like millionaire, billionaire investors who are getting very rich off of renewable energies, et cetera. So the opportunity is there. And certainly now the sort of cultural clout is increasing, right, for writing these big checks to environmental work. But I think, Paola, what we've talked about before with this, like, the culture of repair, the culture of less is more, but like better, more beautiful things. There's such a culture, like consumeristic cultural challenge here of like still needing to have more than other people. Cause like, I don't know, it just keeps coming back to me like, there's actually plenty of everything for everyone.
Absolutely.
So I don't know, greedy rich people are a problem, yes. I don't have an answer to greed. Do you, like?
No.
Sorry to be a disappointing answer on that one. Do you have the answer?
I definitely resonate with the sense that we need to have a cultural change where we feel like we can have like a spa for the mind, such that we feel like we have enough because we have abundance, we have enough clothing on earth to clothe us for the next many generations. And I feel like refashioning, reappropriating, sorry, I used the word appropriating, but like upcycling all these things can be really important. I feel like we live in such a scarcity of time. Inflation is really killing us. And it seems that the long-term planning it takes to take ideas from conception into well foundationed things that can last generations is not a luxury that we can access in such a fast cycle world that we live in.
I think that's so important, and especially this concept of enough.
Yeah.
So to spoil a little bit my surprise for Paola at the end, there's these two words that Sherry Mitchell used in her essay in All We Can Save. One is mama bezu, which means he or she has enough. It's an acknowledgement that an individual has what they need to live their life with a sense of safety and dignity. And the other word is alabezu, which means everyone has enough. And that everyone envisioned in that phrase includes all the beings in the natural world. And so when we are contemplating the value of enough, we recognize that mama bezu must also always be weighed against alabezu to ensure that there is a balance in life. And I just think, we all need to figure out what is really enough and shift that. Thank you for your question. The questions are happening only over here at this microphone. Yes.
Hi there.
Hi.
So one thing that I often think about is how best to change minds and how to be influential. I personally am a filmmaker, and I've realized just through observation mostly that media is certainly one of the most provocative ways to influence a large body of people. But one thing that I've been reckoning with a lot recently is the fact that media takes so many resources to produce. And so my question to you guys is, especially media that is, like I said, the most productive, which I think is sometimes things like film, fashion, architecture, etc. These things are sometimes the most consuming. Should creators choose to produce and sacrifice resources in order to change minds and in order to influence, while compromising resources? Should they make that sacrifice in order to make the change, or should it be done in many more local efforts?
I think, again, I would defer to the sense of kind of community. You can't really control, you know what I mean? You can't really control how it's going to sort of manifest and operate. You know, like you can't get in front of that and say, I'm gonna operate in this particular way in terms of preserving X, Y, Z and hoping that you get this particular result. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like I'm spiraling, right? I feel like
It's this whole question of like, we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? Like
There
if we
you
get
go.
so obsessed
Thank
with
you.
having zero impact, then we can't do anything.
There you go, yeah.
And so yes, the constant cost-benefit analysis is very tricky. Like, how did we all get
Fantastic.
here tonight, and what are we wearing? You can sort of like go down this rabbit hole of like freezing and not making things. What we need to do is like salvage punk it, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you have the intention to produce this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have the resources that are available to you, and you're operating with a community that supports what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the best way to get it out. And it goes back to what we were talking about, you know, the eco-romance, whatever. It starts from
Or whatever.
You know,
Climate rom-coms.
Climate
That is the
rom-coms.
answer. I want a climate
rom-coms are a
rom-com.
thing.
But but there's so much enormous power in the fact that you are thinking in this way to begin with, and that you are considerate of how to approach this thing, right? And leading with that.
Use your power for good.
Exactly. And leading with that and working with your community and your collaborators, I think is all you can really do, and it's incredibly powerful. Because imagine if everyone all over was asking the same question that you're asking, just fundamentally had that sensibility to say, hey, I want to do this thing. Is this the best way to proceed? You know what I mean? So the fact that you're already there,
Thank you.
I think is incredibly powerful.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, we're gonna try to take like 2 more quick ones. Oh man, there's a whole line back there, sorry. You're gonna have to track these 2 down after the show, I think. Okay.
Hello. So I'm new to New York, and I've lived in a couple different places before. And during this presentation, we were kind of talking about like future optimism and how through exhibits in like Milan, a city that is interested in design, you can introduce this idea of climate optimism to a populace. And I was just wondering, in New York, in a city where some people wake up and see like a doomsday clock outside of their window, how would you spread this idea of future optimism, of we can still change things, to the populace in like a busy city like here?
Well, welcome to New York. Yes. And New Yorkers are the most optimist people you will find. I mean, as somebody that moved to New York, I'm always like amazed by the kind of resourcefulness and energy that New Yorkers have. What do you think? So I think that if anything, probably it's other parts of the world that you have to spread or convince. New Yorkers are ripe. You know, they can't wait to.
Extremely cynical, and also like anything is possible.
Yeah,
We've got
exactly.
it at the same damn time.
beautiful people.
Do we have maybe one or two more quick questions?
Thank you for hosting this event. It's been really great. I just wanted to quickly ask, politics and policy was mentioned very briefly, and I think in a time when we're losing faith in our government, can you reflect on a world where designers and architects take their skills and their optimistic view of the future and imagine them in government? So if we can kind of let go of architects being stuck in their architectural roles, but take that into government, what that future could look like?
It actually is something that architects and designers have been preaching for such a long time, and there's been different efforts, and they're continuing. Something is happening in Copenhagen this week, and Helsinki has a chief design officer in the mayor's office. So they could be really, really, really useful. And in some cases, they become mayors, and so they can make wonderful things happen. But in general, it is up to us, not you because you're a scientist, but yeah, you're a cultural.
I'd love to be off the hook for this.
Architects and designers have to really give architecture and design not a better, but a different name so that it can be inserted where it belongs, which is in policy and politics, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I love the well-meaning projects of creating these, mobile structure design projects to deal with, housing and unhoused issues, but the gap in architectural education is not realizing how much of that is at the behest of the reality of policies and very particular structures. And there's a lot of arrogance in architectural education to see us as polymaths that we can solve these problems. But no, we're connected to much larger systems. So these conversations, the collaboration, interdisciplinary engagement with other fields, sociologists, anthropologists, historians, et cetera, ecologists, are incredibly important and don't happen enough at the educational level, I think. There needs to happen so much more.
Sure. We'll take one last question.
Wow, it's a lot of weight on the shoulders. I guess, so to speak. I'm from the upstate. Wu-Tang is for the children. I'm from Westchester, New York.
Not upstate.
I know, and I have the same argument. A lot of people would beg to differ that you're not from the state, people from the state. It's time limit.
It's okay. Agree to agree. Wu-Tang for the children.
Wu-Tang is for the
Westchester,
children.
not upstate. Wu-Tang, yes.
For children.
I'll take it. I'll say all that to say this. What way would you then bring the availability of this this climate positivity to our quote upstate region, or a place that doesn't have? I mean, down here in the city, you guys have a lot of avenues to explore ideas and stuff like that. Upstate, you kind of get bottlenecked into this kind of public school route if you don't have the means, so be it, to explore private school. You kind of get bottlenecked into, maybe you get chemistry, maybe you get physics. I don't really know. Maybe you do Calc 2, hopefully. I would expect so, but it's not always a guarantee. What would you say, how would you convey this message of positivity and kind of moving forward in the climate realm of what you could do to better the world around you, whether it's going on a hike and picking up trash?
How can we get more people engaged in solutions who are
how do you get
in this mix?
How do you get the upstate kids, hell, even Buffalo, how do you
Okay, actual upstate, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe we go
What do you think?
No, I think it goes back to my thing about collaboration, which is the crux of this my foray into this project was, the one at MoMA started with the Frozen Neighborhoods, which was Brooklyn, and then the ProtoFarm Communities of upstate New York is because I have that relationship of you know, my younger sister's in Ithaca, and she's a real farmer doing this shit for real. And I always joke that, like, I'm just imagining this world, you know what I mean? But she's actually there, like,
Weeding,
getting it
dirt
done.
under her nails.
And I
Yeah.
think it really comes back to recognizing the relationships and creating these collaborations. There's really no reason why there should be such a disconnect between, you know, being called out for not being as deep up top as possible.
Well, I don't know, man. I'm here for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
And
back to what I said about being interdisciplinary, not being like architects have all the answers because we, you know, our work involves, you know, history and whatever. No, we need to work. We need to collaborate with people who actually do this work for real, and that occurs in this small little, you know, upstate downstate thing. It needs to occur. Like something like 72% of New York State is forest. You know what I mean? And like, what are we doing exactly? You're like, I gotta check.
I'm not sure
I gotta
about
check
that
those
number.
numbers.
I'm from there. I take a walk in the park every afternoon.
67. It's a very high number.
Janisha, could you
It
do a
actually
quick fact
covers-
check for me, please?
It's
Paola,
a
do you have
very
anything to
high
add
number.
on that?
No, I don't know nothing about upstate. Yeah.
Well, I think the first thing I thought of with that
Fake
question
stats.
was like, thank you.
I was close.
60, you were
What did I say?
72?
75, you said.
Wait a minute, I thought I said 67.
No, you said 75.
Oh, okay. So 61.
He's an
65.
artist. It's fine.
Close.
It's fine. He's envisioning the future where
A
it's
lot.
72%.
A lot.
So I think when I think about that question, I actually think about the role of artisans and the role of the trades and the way that like we are like 1 million electricians short in the United States of what's needed to make this transformation, right? So there really is a role for everyone, and I wish that we would like deepen our respect for people with actual physical hands-on skills. Which brings me, so shout out to the trades.
For real.
Biggest applause of the night for the trades. So we're going to close out this extremely delightful conversation. I've been so honored to be with you, to have the chance to curate this show, to be part of the Pioneer Works community. And when I interviewed you, Paola, for my book, you mentioned that what we really need for design is a new Hippocratic oath. Oh, yeah. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the original sort of old school Hippocratic oath was, you know, the famous line is first do no harm. And this was for the medical field, ancient Greek doctors. You raised the need for it for architects and designers. Other people I've interviewed said the equivalent for like investors, for policymakers, for people in technology. Like we need this first do no harm Hippocratic oath. But I encourage you to all like Google the Hippocratic oath. It is bizarre and hilarious. I will not spoil it for you. But based on that discussion, I teamed up with yet another architect, Juana Stănescu, one of my very, very dearest friends, and we attempted to write what we call a climate oath. And so this is going to be the first time I have ever shared this publicly. I'm going to read it for you. And thank you for the inspiration. Last caveat, it's a little corny.
We would hope so. Come
But
on.
Juana's like,
Oaths
you gotta
have to
lean
be
into corny because like corny and earnest and heartfelt are like the sweetest siblings that all blur together. So just keep that in mind. On the majesty of turquoise seas and fireflies and aspen trees, on the honor of our parents, our ancestors, and humans to come, on the wonders of laughter and sunshine, I commit myself to climate solutions for our magnificent planet. I will live into and up to this oath. First, move from I to we. We will expand our sense of interdependence. We will rein in our sense of individualism. We will ask, what should we do together? Survival is collective. Our fates are intertwined. Second, do no harm. We will restore and heal, not pollute and deplete. We will regenerate ecosystems and our own resolve. We will live lightly on the earth. We will welcome accountability. When making choices, lean into sweetness and generosity. Third, less is more. We will expand our creativity and contract our consumerism. We will explore better ways together, not only seeking the easiest way. We will conserve and distinguish between needing and wanting. There is such a thing as enough. Mama Bezu, ala Bezu, basta.
Basta.
We make these commitments for ourselves and to our communities. Along the way, we will be gentle with our own imperfections and others. This is a world of our making. We can remake it, remix it, restore it, rebalance it. The path of least resistance is only one of many paths. Possibility exists. I will be part of getting it right. We will be part of getting it right. Thank you.
Bravo, bravo.
Thank you,
It's
thank you, thank you, thank you
lovely.
for being here. Hang out, have drinks, explore the garden, and think together about our climate future.